Hello, Daddy. Welcome back to our channel. My name is Ryan, one half of the beloved Sarku. That's the Sam and Ryan cinematic universe. Samantha is actually in New York as we speak, or as I am filming this video, and we're very excited to reunite and get some vlog content out for you in the next couple of weeks, so keep your eyes out for that. Today, it's just me. A few weeks ago, we released a video that was Two Truths and a Lie Heather's edition, where I told you 3 stories, all of which were true, but one contained a lie. And it was your job in the comments to guess which one was the lie. Today, I'm going to reveal which one of those 3 stories was the lie. So if you haven't seen that video yet, pause right now and go check it out. And if you have seen it, I'm going to reveal the truth now. So I told you 3 stories. One was a story about JD donning a white trench coat and coming out during bows as one of the ghosts with Heather Chandler, Ram, and Kurt. One story was about Winona Ryder coming to see Heather's and us being really nervous that she hated it. She ended up not hating it, but we were really nervous that she did. And one story was about my New York City Heather's off-Broadway stalker who tried to get my phone number from my castmates and at one point even follow me home. All of those stories contained truth, but one of them contained a lie. And the story with the lie in it was the story about the white trench coat. We never actually rehearsed an iteration where Heather, Ram, and Kurt were joined by JD in his ghost form. And the costume designer, while she was from Liv and Maddie and while she was brilliant, never found nor was asked to find a white trench coat. In the version of the story that I told you, which was the lie, I said that that was her idea. It was actually my idea. I wanted JD to be donned in a white trench coat and to join them as ghosts at the end because I was pissed that I was the only member of the entire company who wasn't in the final number, because even though all of those people up there are dead, they still got to join everyone for the final number. I'm like, I'm dead too, so if the dead people get to join in for the final number, why doesn't JD get to stand up being like, it could be beautiful? I pitched JD in the white trench coat to our director Andy probably 6 times, and every time that I said it, he was like, that's a good idea, Ryan! But nothing actually ever came of it. It was a good idea, but not something that they were willing, able, or even interested in executing. So while my heart breaks for the fact that this idea never came to fruition, the way that I described the idea potentially happening and the fact that we piloted it in LA is a lie. Which means that yes, Billy Crystal and Winona Ryder came to see us in LA. We saw Winona exactly where she was sitting. We were so worried that she hated the show. It turns out she didn't hate the show, but we were really nervous. And yes, I had a New York City off-Broadway Heather's stalker who literally followed my castmates to a restaurant, told them that she was my aunt, and asked them to give her my phone number. Luckily they didn't, but it was very scary. So those 2 truths and a lie stories were all about Heather's the musical, both our run in Los Angeles and our subsequent run off-Broadway in New York. This time I'm going to do 2 truths and a lie, and I'm going to tell you stories just sort of generally about Broadway. If you want me to zoom in to working on Disney's Frozen on Broadway or working on Wicked on Broadway, by all means leave it in the comments and I can do more specific stories from those projects. But this is just Broadway in general, and frankly the reason that I wanted to do Broadway in general is because I have a really funny audition story that I wanted to share. So I'm going to start with that one. Here's how the game works, Daddy, if you didn't see the last video. I am going to tell you 3 stories about my life as a Broadway performer. All 3 of them are true, but contained within one of the stories is a bold-faced lie. It is your job to decipher which story contains the lie. I'm going to tell you 3 stories about my experience on Broadway. You are going to leave your comments deciding which one is the lie. And the next time we play 2 truths and a lie with my career, I will reveal the story with the lie in it from this video, and in the subsequent video tell you 3 more stories. So like I said, I had a funny story about an audition that I wanted to share with you. I am not a dancer. And for some reason, I've played Fiyero, who literally has a song called Dancing Through Life, and I've played Hans on Broadway, who sings with Anna, Love is an Open Door, in which there is this massive dance sequence with all of these crazy lifts and turns and spins and cartwheels, none of which I am trained for. I am what we call in the industry a mover, not a dancer, but somehow the fake it till you make it mindset got me on Broadway as Fiyero and as Hans. This is a story about faking it until you make it. I went in for Hans on Broadway a few times. I actually went in for Hans for the original cast and got very close, but ultimately that one didn't go my way. But it was a really positive experience, and I had this sort of hope in my heart that, if Frozen sticks around on Broadway for long enough, maybe once the original cast steps out, they might cast me as Hans. And lo and behold, 2 years after Frozen opened on Broadway, they were starting to look for a replacement for Hans. And so I went into audition. The first audition was just reading some of the scenes and singing Hans of the Southern Isles, which is a new song in the musical that isn't in the movie. And of course, an excerpt from Love is an Open Door. That audition went really well. They expressed to me that they were interested in bringing me back to callbacks, and that callbacks would contain a dance portion, to which I said, what? And they said, oh yeah, Hans has a really big dance number. Have you not seen the show? And I was like, nope, but I'm going to. So me and a friend went to see Frozen that night, and I watched in horror as Patty Murin and Joe Carroll, who was playing Hans at the time, lunged, spun, grapevined, and lifted their way across the stage in what is actually a pretty complicated and very physical dance number. I then went home and found as many YouTube videos as I possibly could and studied the dance voraciously and decided, I think maybe I could do this, which is not exactly a vote of confidence. It's not like I can absolutely do this. I was going into this very much feeling, I think maybe I can. I am an okay dancer. It's not that the choreography was like incredibly difficult. I can pick up choreography as long as it's not like dancing. But the thing that really worried me about this number was the lifts. At one point, Hans lifts Anna behind his back, drops her torso while she hangs between his legs, and then flips her over his back. Then they do a couple turns, she cartwheels into him, then you do a turn, she does a turn, she comes charging at you, you lift her up into what's called a Juliet lift, and then it transitions into a fireman's carry where you take her entire body, put it over your shoulder, and march across the stage. Lifting is a science, and there are all kinds of ways to lift healthy, there's all kinds of ways for you and your partner to find the counterbalances, and different methods in which you can make lifting so much easier, none of which I knew at the time. So I was going in absolutely blind and just thinking, I'm just going to hoist these women into the air and hope for the best, and if I throw out my back, I'll deal with it tomorrow. Which, by the way, is exactly what happened. I woke up the next morning and could barely walk. So I get to the dance call and it goes a little something like this. There are 10 women and like 3 men. Ain't that just the way in the entertainment industry? But essentially, the Hanses were going to be paired up with like 3 women each, and we were going to just be like doing Love is an Open Door, doing all of these lifts with all of these different women so that they could make sure that we had the stamina to lift the women and so that they could see that the women had the proper form to do the dance. So it was a callback for Anna, it was a callback for Hans, and it was a bit of a mix and match as well. So I ended up working with 3 actresses, none of whom I'm going to say by name, but all of whom I love. And we did Love is an Open Door a few times each to varying degrees of success. It is a very hard number, no matter how good of a dancer you are, and to get that in your body and to find that sort of physical chemistry with the person who's lifting you in an audition setting is really tough. And so luckily, it was tough for everyone. And so a lot of it felt almost more like a workshop than an audition of just sort of like, let's collaborate to see how fast you can figure this out and how fast we can figure this out together instead of one of those high pressure situations of like, just be perfect the first time. So that's good. We were doing the part of the number where Anna does a cartwheel in front of Hans. He holds her waist while she does a cartwheel. I was working with an actress at the time who I am dear friends with and know very well. We were so excited to work together. We had done the dance a few times and it went really well. And now it was go time. The dance captain who was teaching us the number said, okay guys, this is the one that really counts. We're going to put on the music. We're going to film it. Let's see what you got. So we're doing Love is an Open Door. There's the part behind the back and under the legs and all of this. We shunny out of it. I get to center stage. I prep with her. She starts the cartwheel and kicks me in the face. And I turn to the dance captain and I go, if that happens again, do I just book it automatically? And then we do it again. I get kicked in the face again. Me and the dance captain make eye contact. He winks at me. I end up getting called back for final callbacks and booking Hans. And I know that the two things don't have anything to do with each other, but I want to believe in my heart so badly that the reason that I booked Hans on Broadway was because one of the Annas kicked me in the face. Now, a story about Wicked. I was in Wicked for 9 months, but 2.5 of those months I was out on injury. I injured my ankle and I injured my elbow. And I'm going to tell you what happened with both. I started working on Wicked in late August of 2018. I had a couple weeks of rehearsal, and then I was going to start the show. I actually started the show and made my Broadway debut on September 11th of that year, which made me feel kind of superstitious. And in retrospect, I had every right to feel that way. Rehearsals went great. I had the hardest time with Dancing Through Life because it's a dance number, but I worked with some really exceptional dance captains and choreographers who were able to get me right and tight and ready for Dancing Through Life. While I was absolutely prepared to make my Broadway debut as Fiyero in Wicked, you can understand that I was quite nervous because I was making my Broadway debut as Fiyero in Wicked. So 15 minutes before half hour, the night of my Broadway debut, one of the dance captains agreed to meet me on stage and run through Dancing Through Life with me one more time. At the end of Fiyero's first verse and chorus, he climbs up a ladder on the side of the stage and does this like little woes are fleeting, blows are glancing, this sort of like lunge off the ladder, but he's holding on to the ladder. Then he jumps off the ladder and says, when you're dancing through life, and that's when he makes his way across the stage. So I'm rehearsing, I climb up the ladder, I do woes are fleeting, blows are glancing, and as I'm doing this lunge off the ladder, my brand new boots that were just made for me and were not yet worn in slipped off the rung of the ladder. I came falling down the ladder and landed on my ankle like this. I stood up. I put no weight on my ankle. I looked at the dance captain like this. He said, "You're okay. You're okay." I said, "I don't know if I'm okay." He said, "You're okay." I said, "I don't know." He said, "You're okay." He said, "Put some weight on it." I put some weight on it. It was excruciating, but I was like, this is my Broadway debut. I can't not do this. He's like, "We're going to figure something out." He got me some ice. He got me an ankle brace. I did the show for like a month. And then eventually got x-rays and I had all kinds of torn ligaments and stuff, so I had to be out for 2 weeks so my ankle could heal. So that was injury number one. After being out of the show for a couple of weeks, I came back and within a couple of days injured myself again. There was a stunt in the show where Fiyero swings onto the stage on a rope and he lets go of the rope and he lands with this rifle and he says, "Let the green girl go," and points the rifle at the guards. And they always talk about this rope swing being a very difficult effect because you have to hold the rifle and the rope and swing onto the stage at the same time, let go of the rope, but keep the rifle, land in the correct position, and start the scene. They always talk about this effect being difficult for the Fiyeros because you're putting your weight in very strange places. They talk about like Fiyero shoulder and how a lot of people who do this show end up having some issues with their shoulder. So I knew to expect this. And to be completely honest, before I was out on my first injury, doing that rope swing 8 shows a week, I was starting to feel it. I don't know if I felt it in my shoulder, but just sort of like from my elbow to my shoulder, just kind of that whole part of my arm would just feel this like kind of dull pain when I would do the rope swing effect. I'm not even joking. After being back in the show for a couple of days after my ankle injury, I climb up my little ladder, I hold my rope, I swing onto stage, I hear a pop, I land, I try to lift up my gun, I can't do it, so I put the gun down, I do the scene, I get carried off stage as per the choreography. Then Fiyero has one more scene at the end of the show, and then the show is over. So I finished out my show, but I heard this pop. I got x-rays the next day, and sure enough, where this bone meets this bone, I didn't really pay attention in science when we learned what the bones are called, there was all of this splintering and fracturing that my doctor said would potentially require surgery if I don't stop doing the show immediately. So I made my Broadway debut. 2 weeks later, I was out with an ankle injury. 2 weeks later, I joined the show again. A few days later, my elbow popped. I was out for 2 months. I rejoined at the beginning of 2019 and carried out the rest of my contract through May. If you tried to see me in Wicked in 2018 and you didn't see me, that's why. I got injured twice in 2 weeks in that show, and it broke not only my ankle and my elbow, but my heart as well. We're going back to Arendelle for this final story. As many of you know, I was in Frozen on Broadway in 2020. Remember 2020? Famously a great year. Well, I joined the company of Frozen in February of 2020. Do you remember what happened in March of 2020? I sure do. A global pandemic that shut down Broadway and closed Frozen permanently. Now, of course, at the time we didn't have a crystal ball and did not know that the pandemic was coming. There were talks about COVID-19, what it was, how fast it was spreading, how it might be dangerous, but on literally no one's radar was the notion of closing Broadway for an entire year. So, while the pandemic was proving to be globally serious, and while we had many protocols in place, Broadway was not planning to close, and therefore productions were continuing to make plans on how they were going to do special events to advertise their shows to try to sell more tickets. So Mackenzie, Kurt, Sierra Renee, and myself, along with Ellen Marlowe, joined the cast of Frozen. There were all of these press plans being made about how to promote the new cast of Frozen, because Sierra and Mackenzie were the first people to play Anna and Elsa after Patty and Casey left the show. There was excitement around me playing Hans because I'm a Disney Channel starlet, and they wanted to sort of promote this as like the new cast of Frozen. Come see Frozen in this new way. And this is what Broadway shows do all the time. It's like, we have a new cast, we want to promote the new people, because if there are people who haven't seen the show yet but are fans of these people, maybe they'll buy tickets for the first time, and that's what Broadway producers want, people to buy tickets. So they created this publicity stunt. I can't even believe that I am going to relive this right now, because I am still so sad. Disney, and when I say Disney, I mean like Zaddy Disney, not just like Disney on Broadway, like Zaddy Disney, had this idea to shoot a docuseries starring me in Norway, where Ryan McCartan, who is currently playing Hans in Frozen on Broadway, was going to go to the fjords of Norway that inspired the animation of Disney's Frozen. I was going to go to the church in Norway that inspired the castle where Elsa's coronation happens. I was going to take this all expenses paid trip to Norway with a camera crew following me around while I experienced all that Norway had to offer through the lens of how actual Norwegian landscaping and architecture inspired the movie Frozen and subsequently the Broadway show. That trip was scheduled for early April 2020, and the world shut down in mid-March of 2020. When I tell you that I was not sitting in my dressing room looking at the COVID numbers in America in March, I was in my dressing room looking at the COVID numbers in Norway, being like, there's no way that they're going to cancel this trip. I'm going to Norway. I'm filming a docuseries about how cool Frozen is and how I, Ryan McCartan, am playing Hans. So if you like what you see here, and if you like everything you learned about Norway, maybe you should come to New York because it's a little closer than Norway, and you can see us in Arendelle, which will remind you of Norway, but isn't Norway because it's a fictional place that Disney made up to make a lot of money. I've never been to Norway. I have this like secret dream of being a travel vlogger. This was like the opportunity of a lifetime. And 15 days before I got on a plane to Norway, the world got shut down. And I got an email saying, don't worry, we'll just reschedule Norway for when we're back. And Frozen never came back because the pandemic shut it down permanently. So I never got to go to Norway. F's in the chat, you guys. F's in the chat for Norway. So there you go, Daddy. Did I get kicked in the face during a Broadway audition? Did I snap my ankle, crackle my shoulder, and pop my elbow in Wicked on Broadway? Or did I have an offer to go to Norway, all expenses paid, by Disney's Frozen on Broadway, but the pandy shut it down? All of these stories are true, but one of them contains a bold-faced lie. Which story do you think is the lie? Let me know in the comments below, and the next time I do a Two Truths and a Lie series, I will tell you which one was the lie from this video. As always, be sure to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching our content. Please keep your eye on this channel as we have many more exciting things coming your way. Much love to you all, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye, Daddy.